This is ATC International. Welcome to Asian Television Content. Channel 31 Online TV.
Hello, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Isang magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat, mga Ka Bangsa Melayu, mga Kakampi, mga Kasangga at mga Kadiwa. Isang mapayapang gabi po sa ating lahat, ganun din sa aking kapatid na si Direk Irwina. Magandang gabi, kapatid.
Yes, magandang gabi sa iyo, mahal kong kapatid, Tuanku Maharanee. So yan, mamaya-maya, susunod na sa atin si Mami Divine, and hopefully sana makasama si Mary Dave. So ayan, aabangan natin.
Yan. Yes, magandang balita yan.
Although may sakit-sakit pa yata si Mami Mary, pero wala, hopefully. Yan.
Yes. Okay. Ayan, mga kakampi at mga kabangsa Melayu. Again, isang mapayapang gabi po. Wednesday po ngayon, September 22. At marami po tayong pag-uusapan ngayon. Saan man po kayo naroroon sa mundo ngayon, no? Mapa US, mapa Saudi, mapa Korea, Japan, or wherever you are, we are sending our beautiful and warmest good evening to all of you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Ayan. So doon sa ating mga tagapakinig, sa ating mga viewers at sa ating mga taga-subaybay, no? Yung ating mga kabangsa Melayu somewhere in Cotabato City, the RG team, as well as the Raja Buayan of Kidatuan Buayan, Raja Sirungan rather of Kidatuan Buayan. Isang magandang gabi po dyan sa inyong lahat. Ganun din sa ating butihing mayor po ng Cotabato City, si Honorable Attorney Sinchayani Sayali. Ayan. So, I hope na nasa mabuti kayong kalagayan ngayon, anuman po ang inyong ginagawa, at anuman po ang ating hinaharap na matinding problema sa buhay. Kung may mabibigat ho tayong problema na ating hinaharap ngayon, ibigay lang ho natin sa pong may kapal at huwag ho tayong huminto na patuloy na magtrabaho, patuloy na mangangarap at patuloy na mag-pray sa Kanya upang sa ganon ay ibigay po niya sa atin ang lahat ng ating mga minimithi sa buhay. Ayan. So siguro,
yes.
Bumati na muna. Batiin mo muna
yes.
Yung mga...
Yeah, so mga kakampi, mga kasangga at mga kadiwa, magandang gabi po sa inyo muli dito sa Heritage, ano? And of course, huwag kayong aalis, napakaganda talaga ng topic natin ngayong araw na to. Ito talaga ay maaaring pumukaw sa ating mga kaisipan at opinion. So huwag kayong aalis talaga at antamayanan ninyo ang ating magandang tatalakayin ngayon. So sa lahat po, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, and to the whole world, good evening po sa inyo lahat. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh po sa inyo lahat. Yan.
Ayan. Mga kabangsa Melayu. Last time po ay napag-usapan po natin ay iilang topic po ng ating history, ng ating kultura kung saan pinag-usapan natin ang mahalagang contribution po ng ating mga ninuno kagaya ni Lakandula, ni Raja Sulaiman at saka si Raja Matanda. kung saan napakalaki po ang kanilang contribution sa ating buhay dahil tayo po ay doon sa kanila kumbaga pa nakakonect, no? Yung lalo na po yung ating mga kapatid from Luzon and Visayas. So ito po ay mahaba-haba pa rin pag-uusapan actually ito at patuloy po natin sasaliksikin ang bawat strand, no? Bawat what's this? Butil or bawat line ng ating kasaysayan upang matugunan kung ano man yung ating mga kailangan malaman. Ayan, ang aking kapatid na si Sister Marie.
Yes!
Salamat.
Yes!
Ayan.
So, ayan surprise!
Ako'y natuwa doon Tuloy-tuloy at bigla na lang merong nag-spark sa aking mga mata at yun na pala si
Yeah.
Ma'am Marie. Ayan.
Yeah.
Welcome
Yes,
back to
surprise.
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome back po kayo. Ayan, kumata na kayo. Sige po, batiin nyo na yung ating mga pamilya.
Tapos miss na miss ka na talaga namin.
Yes,
Talaga.
Sa Longga po, saan po kayo? Yung ating mga pamilya sa loob ng kapuluan.
Sa buong kapuluan. Yan, sa buong kapuluan.
Sa loob o sa buo. Ayan, sa buong kapuluan ng Pilipinas. Ayan, bumati ka
Yes.
na, Marie.
Thank you. Good evening sa lahat-lahat na kakampi, sa lahat kadiwa, kasangga, sa lahat na pamilya kong na-miss ako, lahat na mga viewers. I'm back. Okay na ako. Nami-miss ko kayo lahat talaga. Nami-miss ko kayo. Minsan pinapanood ko pero hindi masyado. Pero ngayon, nandito na ako. Kaya mag-stay lang tayo lahat ngayong gabi. At magandang pag-usapan natin. Maraming tayong pag-usapan. Good evening, Tuanku Maharanee. Oh, I love you, I miss you. Direk Irina, I love you, I miss you. And
Yes.
thank you very much, Josh and Jacob. Thank you very much. Sekreto namin ito kanina para masurpresa kayo. Sa lahat nating pamilya sa Pilipinas, sa buong mundo, sa lahat, sa Virginia, sa Georgia, sa Chicago, lahat, sa Maryland, sa West Virginia, sa Pennsylvania, lahat, sa Florida, lahat. Saka dito sa Pilipinas, taga Taytay Rizal, sa Iloilo City, sa Dumaguete City, dito sa Olongapo City, sa lahat, kung mayroon man ako na-miss, please, excuse me, I'm sorry, but next time itatry ko ilan. Basta lahat.
Tingnan pa muna sa ilong ko.
Good evening,
Tingnan pa muna sa
lahat sa
ilong
inyo.
ko.
At magandang gabi sa inyo lahat. Thank you.
Ayan, mga kakampi at mga kabangsa Melayu, ako po ay natuwa doon at nakabalik ulit ang ating kapatid na si Sister Marie. Salamat sa Diyos, salamat sa Allah at kayo po ay gumaling na. At yun ay talagang pinapanalangin po namin yun sa ating may kapal. Ayan, sana po magtuloy-tuloy na yan at sana sa ating grupo, sa ating momshies, no, na mahal ko itong tatlo na to, sana walang magkasakit sa atin. Kaawaan sana tayo ng Diyos. Okay. Ayan mga yes, yan mga kakampi at mga kabangsa Melayu. Alam nyo, kagaya ng sinabi ko kanina, napakalaki po kasi ng ating kasaysayan na dapat natin unti-unting balikan ang mga history na kung minsan yun ang nagdala sa atin ng malungkot na karanasan sa ating mga buhay. At kung minsan naman yung mga karanasan na yun ay sanhi lamang ng tawag ng pagkakataon. 'Di ba? Madalas sa ating buhay na mayroong mga pangyayari na ayaw natin mangyari, pero yun ang nakakabuti para sa atin. Meron naman mga pagkakataon na gustong-gusto nating mangyari at gusto-gusto natin kunin sa ating buhay ay hindi natin alam na yun pala ay makakasira sa ating buhay. 'Di ba? May mga ganong sitwasyon po ng ating buhay, even po sa ating gobyerno, sa ating pamamalakad sa ating buhay. Mayroong mga madalas na ganon ang mga pangyayari na kung minsan gustong-gusto natin marating o gusto-gusto natin gawin ang isang bagay, ngunit hindi natin alam na yun pala ay makakasira sa atin, higit sa ating pamilya. At minsan naman, gustong-gusto natin, ayaw natin yung isang bagay, yun pala ang makakabuti. So ngayong gabi, mga kakampi at mga kabangsa Melayu, napakahalaga po ng ating topic. Alam niyo kung bakit? Kasi kahapon, September 21, ay napaka-memorable po ng araw na yon, na kung saan doon nag-declare ng martial law or yung sinasabi nilang Proclamation number 1081, na kung saan ang ating dating Pangulong Marcos ay nag-declare po ng martial law sa buong kapuluan. Ayan, sa buong, di ba? Sa buong kapuluan ng Pilipinas. At ang dami pong nangyari sa loob ng martial law na yan. 'Di ba? So this time, mga kakampi, mga kabangsa Melayu, palaging ang nakikita natin mula sa simula ay yung bad image, no? Yung naidulot ng martial law ng mga panahon na yon. At alam nyo, mga kabangsa Melayu at mga kakampi, ako mismo at that time na nagproklama si President Marcos ng martial law, that was December 30, 1972, no? At kung hindi ako nagkakamali, nasa 6 years old pa lang ako. Nag-start ang administration ni Marcos noong December 30, 1965. Ibig sabihin, hindi pa po ako ipinanganak. Sa mga panahon na yon, ang kwento ng aking nanay, ng aking ina, napakaganda ng buhay ng mga Pilipino. Yung mga panahon na yon. At ang katunayan nito, kami mismo sa aming pamilya, ang ganda po ng negosyo ng mga panahon na yon. Maganda yung buhay namin. At lahat po ay murang-mura at that time. Kasi kung hindi ako nagkakamali, kapatid at saka Sister Marie, alam ko kayo, mas nauna kayo sa akin. Pero ito ay kwento lamang ng ating mga parents, ng ating mga tito-titas. Noong mga panahon na yon, ay ang dollar daw noon ay 3 pesos pa lang. No? That was 1965. Ang equivalent po ng US dollar at that time po ni Marcos was 3 pesos. Kung hindi ako nagkakamali.
Yes.
Yes.
Tama.
Okay. Tama ba? Now,
Yes,
noong na-oust si Marcos, that was 1986. No? Tandang-tanda ko pa kasi, alam nyo kapatid, Derek Irwina at Sister Marie, ako mismo bilang leader po ng isang student council at that time, kasi tayo po ay hindi nakapag-aral na well-sustained po ng ating parents. Gawa po ng wala na ho akong parents, wala na ang tatay ko, wala na rin ang nanay ko. So I have to work hard para lang makapagtapos ako. So ang nangyari ay nag-student worker po ako sa isang campus ministry ng Cotabato City, yung Notre Dame University. So at that time, 1986, at the peak talaga nung sinasabi nilang formation nung EDSA Revolution, no? Ang daming kwento, ang daming version nung revolution na yon. At dahil sa murang isip namin at that time, ang daming question mark na naglalaro sa aking isipan. Though ang madalas nating nakikita ay yung bad side nung nangyari nung kapanahunan ni Marcos. So this time, bago natin ipagpatuloy, gusto ko lang i-share sa inyo ang isang short video kasi mamaya ipapakita rin natin yung medyo hindi naman ito mga kabangsa Melayu, mga kakampi at mga kasangga. Gusto ko lang linawin. Hindi po kami anong tawag nito? Anti-Aquino or wala kaming pinapanigan dito. Ang gusto ko lang ipakita is yung katotohanan, yung good and bad side, at saka ano ang katotohanan sa kasaysayan ng ating country. Na kung saan nalugmok tayo doon sa mga kasinungalingan na pilit naging blindfolded tayo doon sa katotohanan. Diba? So this time, titingnan natin, tayo mismo ay kikilatisin natin. May mga talino tayong mga tao at alam din natin na sa kasaysayan ng ating history, marami talagang distorted. Even kami po dito sa Mindanao, kagaya po ng ating advokasya, ay pilit ho natin sinasaliksik kung ano ang katotohanan. So, dahil parte po ng ating buhay itong experience ng martial law noong 1972, kasi ako mismo po na-experience ko namatay ang tatay ko sa isang ambush incident at that peak ng 1972 ng martial law. So this time, titingnan natin, pag-aaralan natin, nasa atin ang desisyon. Ang hihingi natin sa Diyos ay i-guide niya tayo kung saan ang tama at kung saan ang katotohanan. So, Director Josh, baka naman pwedeng paki-play yung first video natin.
I signed Proclamation number 1081 placing the entire Philippines under martial law.
A dark picture usually hovers over the martial law era, what with reports of human rights violations and repression. But with the bad and the ugly also comes the good. The Marcos regime also took on an aggressive infrastructure push. Some of those projects still stand to this day. Case in point, Philippine Heart Center, which was inaugurated during Valentine's of 1975. The Lung Center of the Philippines and the National Kidney and Transplant Institute were both opened to the public on January 16, 1981. The Marcos were also big on boosting the culture and arts sector with the establishment of the Philippine International Convention Center or PICC and the Cultural Center of the Philippines. However, all of these were marred by allegations of corruption and mounting debt, which to this day is still being paid for by Filipinos. Reports of human rights injustices and extrajudicial killings also piled up during Marcos' rule. The writ of habeas corpus was also suspended. According to Amnesty International, about 70,000 people were imprisoned, 34,000 tortured, and over 3,000 killed. Also during this time, almost all forms of media were suppressed or taken over by the government itself.
Ayan. Napaka-short ng video na yon, pero ang laki po ng kanyang ibig sabihin. 'Di ba, kapatid? Ano masasabi mo doon?
Yes po.
Ano masasabi mo doon, kapatid?
Well, talaga tama. Ito yung isa talagang paglalahad ng katotohanan. Dahil ako, wala akong pinapanigan. Okay? Hindi rin ako kahit na ano. Sa tama lang po talaga din ako. Kasi nakita nyo naman kung gaano kalaki ang performance na nagawa ng yumaong Marcos. No? Na tinutulig sa well, alam nyo, sabihin ko sa inyo ang totoo. Ako nag-abroad during the time of Marcos. Nabisto nyo na ugali. Ang edad ko pala. Pero pag-gets ko po ako.
Okay.
Hindi, baka mabilang yung year eh. So, ayan. So, mga kakampi, ang totoo lang po talaga, nang ako'y nag-abroad, di sa immigration, of course, ini-inspect yung mga luggage natin, ano? Nung of course, ipapakita mo sa immigration yung passport mo kasi titignan nila, titignan ka, gaganyan, kakaligot yung mga gamit mo, no? Pero nung nalaman nila na ako ay isang Pilipino, hindi na nila ginalaw ang luggage ko.
You see?
Yes. At alam mo, sabi sa akin, mga kapatid ko, Tuanku and Mami Marie, ang sabi sa akin, you Filipino, go, go, go. Tapos sinarado yung maleta ko.
Wow.
Alam mo, grabe ako, lumakad ako, taas ng ulo ko. Wow, sa loob-loob po ng Pilipino ako. I'm Filipino. Yan, talaga. And that is during the time of Marcos regime, mga kakampi.
Then how about you? How about you, Sister Marie? What can you say about the video? Oh, naka-ano ka?
Mami Marie, nakamute ka. Nakamute ka, Mami Marie.
Nakamute ka. Nakamute yung earphone mo.
Yung microphone mo, Mami Marie.
Nakamute siya. Nagkaroon ng problema. Oy, sayang. Okay. Totoo yun, kapatid. Habang inaayos niyo yung kanyang earphone, mga kakampi at mga kabangsa Melayu, ipagpatuloy lang natin yung ating discussion. Alam mo kasi, kapatid, ang dami kasing nagsasabi na si Marcos ay isang diktador. Na? Siya ay isang corrupt, siya ay isang magnanakaw. Halos lahat na ng napakaraming napakasamang adjective na i-describe kay Marcos ay nasa kanila na lahat. Pero kung titingnan natin yung mga achievements, yung mga performance ni Marcos ay kabaliktaran doon sa mga sinasabi ng mga tao. 'Di ba?
Yes po.
At ang hindi naiintindihan, lalo na ng ating mga new generation, na kung saan na poison na yung kanilang isip dahil doon sa mga maling history na pinalabas. At maalala ko pala, kapatid, tinanggal nila yung history sa high school eh. Yung history subject,
Yes.
no, nung time ni Cory, tinanggal lahat yun. Kung hindi ako nagkakamali, tinanggal ang history subject. So yun po yung isa sa napakalungkot isipin na dahil sa pagtanggal ng history subject na yan, hindi tuloy natin naiintindihan at nalalaman kung ano ang mga katotohanan at kung ano yung totoong kasaysayan ng ating bansa, ng ating mga ninuno, ng ating lugar, 'di ba? So doon nakakalungkot, mga kabagang, no? Mga kabangsa Melayu. Alam niyo kung bakit?
Yes.
Kung titingnan natin yung martial law noon, na sinasabi nila ay dahil kay Marcos, nakita ko mismo at napanood ko mismo yung video ni Marcos na nagsasabi talaga siya na hindi lang ako ang may kagustuhan sa martial law. At ito ay hinihingi ng pagkakataon dahil nung mga panahon na yon ay talagang magiging madidivide na yung ating bansa. It's because of the insurgency, no? Yung kasagsagan ng mga NPA, yung mga komunista, yung dito naman sa amin dito sa Mindanao, yung ano tawag nito? Iminilef, no? Yung mga faction, mayroon pang Black Cert, mayroon pang Ilaga, mayroon pa kung ano-anong grupo ang umusbong nung mga panahon na yon. At yun ay totoong-totoo dahil kami po mismo dito sa Mindanao ay naranasan ho namin ang matindi, no? Na talagang grabe yung nangyari doon sa martial law na yon. At ang hindi natin alam na lingid sa ating mga kaalaman, lalo na nung mga panahon na yon, na ito pala si Marcos ay meron talaga siyang binitiwang salita, meron talaga siyang speech, at yan ay papanood namin sa inyo next episode. Napaka-importante po na marinig mismo natin na kung ano ang sinabi ni Marcos about sa martial law. At yun ay totoong-totoo. Nagkataon lang na ang kanyang pinagkatiwalaan na akala niya yun ay tumutulong sa kanya, ay yun ang nagsamantala. At yun ang gumamit ng kanyang posisyon upang lalong masira. Dahil yun naman talaga ang tactics nila eh, sirain nila ang buong Pilipinas. Noong mga panahon na yun. Ako noong regime ni Marcos, he was, nag-start yung regime niya in December 30, 1965, hindi pa po ako pinanganak doon. Pero alam niyo mga kakampi at mga Ka Bangsa Melayu, ang laki-laki-laki ng naibigay or naitulong or nagawa ni President Marcos noong mga panahon na yun. Dahil maalala ko pa kapatid, kasi I was 6 years old noong 1972 na nag-martial law. At that time, kung ikaw ay nasa 4 years old or 5 years old, parang meron ka pang nare-recall doon sa mga pangyayari, di ba? Kahit pa paano, meron ka talagang marirecall doon sa mga experiences mo. Tama ako? Di ba kapatid? Tama? Ngayon, naalala ko noon na sa mga school, di ba? Sa mga school, merong halos weekly yan nagbibigay ng mga gatas, nagbibigay ng mga vitamins, nagbibigay ng kung ano-ano mga biscuits, yung mga ganon, na binibigay doon sa school. No? Binibigay doon sa mga kabataan. At yun po ay totoo yun. Kung sino man po yung mga ibig ko sabihin, naranasan nila yon, ay pwede rin nila itong i-share sa atin. Ayan. So, anong tawag nito? Nakakabigat ng dibdib na malaman natin yung mga sitwasyon na yon at yung history na yon na tinakpan na ngayon. Diba? It's because of this politics. Tama?
Yes po, tama po yan.
So, dahil dito kapatid, ano sa tingin mo bakit ito si President Marcos ay talagang inimpose niya? Anong mga reasons kaya ni President Marcos kung bakit inimpose niya yung martial law? Aside doon sa insurgency. Sige kapatid.
Wala, yun talaga ang pagkakalam ko, no? Kaya nangyari yan kasi nagkakagulo-gulo na rin tayo. Diba? At ang sinasabi ni Marcos noong panahon na yon, na kung hindi daw niya hindi niya daw ibababa ang martial law, ay pwede tayong pasukin ng mga komunista. Yun ang isang sinasabi ni Marcos during that time. So kaya niya ang martial law. Yun ang pagkakaalam ko sa panahon na yun. Kasi nung panahon na yon, teenager ako. Teenager talaga ako na. So, huwag niyo na bilangin yung edad ko Kasi nabibiso yung edad ko rito. Pagets pa po ako.
Ayan mga kakampi at mga kabangsa Melayu. Alam nyo, sa totoo lang, marami kasing senaryo kapatid Ang sabi nila, kung bakit daw, yung lahat daw ng reason ni Marcos noon, kung bakit siya nag-declare ng martial law, all of those are propaganda. Propaganda lang daw yon. Pero kung titingnan natin...
si Mami Marie.
Hi, Mami
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh,
Loud and
thank
clear.
you. Thank
sige,
you.
ikaw na.
Thank you.
Okay, ikaw na.
Okay. Noong naalaala ko noon, correct me if I'm wrong, ha? Kasi bata pa ako noon, after yatang natalo yata either si Macapagal or si Garcia bago magpresidente si Marcos, bata pa ako noon yun. Tapos, nung mag-martial law, September 21st, 1972, naalala ko lang sa martial law, pag lumalabas ka ng bahay noon, kailangan merong kang flashlight, like curfew, ganon. Umalis kasi ako ng Pilipinas November 2nd, 1972. Kaya hindi ko talaga naranasan mabuti yung martial law. Basta ang alam ko lang talaga, yung naglalakad ka, mayroong kang flashlight, at saka mayroong curfew. Yun lang talaga, Tuanku Maharanee, ang maano ko. Kasi umalis na ako.
Ibig sabihin. Nako, hindi halata sa itsura mo kapatid na Maria, hindi halata kayo ni
Yes.
Direk Irwina, hindi halata mga bagets pa talaga kayo
Yes.
Ayan. Yes, sige kapatid.
Teka, nagkakabistuhan na edad dito.
Ayan, mga kabangsa malayo, bahala na kayo kumuwenta ha. Kwentahin na ninyo kung kaya ninyo. Ayan.
Yan ko Maharanee, Direk Arena. Tama ba ako nung bago nanalo si Marcos, si ano mo ng presidente, si Macapagal o si Garcia?
Si Makapagal.
Sino ka? Macapagal. Okay.
Si Makapagal. Yes.
Naalala ko pa. Yes.
Bago natin ipagpatuloy yung ating discussion, mga kakampi at mga kabangsa malayo, gusto ko lang mag-shoutout kasi medyo marami-rami na itong shoutout dito, kapatid. Ano, ikaw magsi-shoutout o ako?
Yan. Eto siguro kapatid, ako muna kasi konti lang itong nandito sa akin.
Sige,
Sabi
sige.
niya, si Shaira May Lazara Hero po, Tuanku Maharanee and Direk Erwena, good evening. And sabi ni Shaira, Auntie Marie Diggs, good evening, miss you na po. Ayan, sabi ni Shaira. And sabi ni Kimberly Tinga, good evening po. Ayan, sabi niya. Sabi niya, Lola Marie Diggs, sana po kasama ka na. Andito na, Kim, andito na. And then po si Arlene, good evening po. And po si Tito Nel Talavera is watching. Hi, Tito Nel.
Hi, Tito Nel.
Yes. Yan. And sabi
See you
niya, Shaira May,
tomorrow, Tito Nel.
yes. And sabi niya, Shaira May Lazara, Auntie Marie Diggs, good evening, miss you na po. Ayan. And sabi niya, good evening po. Sabi ni Kimberly, Lola Marie Diggs, sana, ay hindi, kanina pa pala to. Sabi niya, OMG, Lola, welcome back. Ayan. Sabi ni Kimberly. Yes, and sabi niya, wow, love you po, Lola. Ayan, sabi niya. And sabi niya, Shaira May, wow, surprise. Sabi niya, beautiful in red ka daw, sabi ni Kimberly. Ayan. And sabi ni Rizalyn Masrado Tinga, yes, auntie, you did it. Ayan. And sabi ni Kimberly uli, well, as always, sabi niya. And of course, marami na dito mga emoji, mga mga emoji na naglalabasan. Of course, kay Evangeline Dasatinga, nanonood din ngayon. And of course, si Mylene Odal, sabi niya, good evening po, watching from Olonga po. Yan, ay, sa mga tiga Olonga po City dyan. Ayan. Marami nang nanalo sa kanila sa game na inano namin noon kay Secretary Panelo. And congratulations, nag-aantay kami dito ni Marie ng yung pinakamalaking premyo. Yung 100,000 sa amin yun.
Balato lang.
Yeah. Kaya yan. Tsaka sabi niya, Mylene Odalay, Lola Marie Diggs, Kirampa Stan Diggs, Lola Evangeline Dasatinga, Love, Mark Yuri Tinga, Mark Kier, and Bunix. Enter the Bunikmik, Ed Empoy, and Empay. Hi, hello, mga baby ko, nakakalimutan ko pala. Kayo, hindi nyo na ako pinaparamdaman sa Discover and Explore, ha? Hindi nyo na ako napaparamdaman. Kayo talaga mga baby ko. Di ba? Malalaki na si 30. Nakita ko sa ang laki na ni 30, oh. And Mylene Odal, shout out po sa papa namin, Eric Tinga. And Eileen Catherine Nova, good evening, watching from Zambales. At birthday pala ni Eileen Catherine Nova. Bukas, happy birthday, Eileen Catherine Nova. Happy birthday sa'yo.
Birthday.
And of course, sabi ni Arlene, hello, Ninang Bebeng, Mary Diggs. Sabi niya, and Evangeline Dasatinga, hello, Tuanku Maharanee, Direk Erwena, Mami Divine, and my dear sister Marie Diggs, watching from Olongapo City. And sabi ni Eileen Catherine Nova, hello, Auntie Marie and Uncle Stan, to Uncle Kambal and Mother Earth, Evangeline Tinga. Oy, Ate Baby Ropeles is watching. Siya ay ang manager ni Jerry Grabal. So, hi, Ate Be. Hi, how are you there?
Hello po.
Oo, thank you for watching, ha. Salamat sa comment mo kanina. Thank you. And sabi niya, Eileen Catherine Nova, it's so nice to watch you again, Auntie Marie, with the beautiful ladies. Wow, thank you, Elaine. Yan, thank you. And sabi ni Evangeline Dasatinga, hello to Dasatinga and Diggs family, wherever you are. Happy viewing. And sabi niya, Ate Baby Rofiles, Very enlightening daw po ang ating programa. So maraming salamat, Ate Beth. And then sabi ni Evangeline Dasating, advance happy birthday to my princess, Elaine Catherine Nova. Enjoy your pandemic birthday. God bless. Ayan. So, wala na pa akong makita rito. Yun lang po nakikita ko na dito.
Ayan, so ako naman, sabi ni Bidaria Muhammad Umar, nasa Kuwait, saan ba to? Assalamualaikum Auntie Bay, Maharanee Permaisuri, Mindanao, Darussalam, at sa lahat. Watching from Qatar. I miss you all. Ayan. Yes, sa mga taga-Qatar dyan, magandang gabi po, magandang umaga, at assalamualaikum. And we have also Mario Del Rosario. Hello po sa inyong lahat, kay Madame Maridigs, at sa pinsan kong maganda si Jamie Tinga. Ayan. Sabi pa ni Kimberly Tinga, OMG! Welcome back, Lola. Love you po. Ayan po. And then, we have also, sino to? Janus Aki, si Jason, from our youth sector ng indigenous people in General Santos City. Good evening, Jay. Matagal na tayo hindi nagkausap. Pasensya na. Alam mo na kung ano nangyari kay kuya mo. Soon, mag-uusap tayo dahil marami tayong gagawin. Ayan. So, please PM mo na lang ako. Okay? Sabi ni MG Tinga, good evening, evening Tuanku. Ayan, dalawa-dalawa pa talaga ha. Evening, Tuanku Maharanee, Derek Irwina at Auntie Maridigs. Hello din po, Uncle Stan, at sa lahat ng taga-subaybay nyo po. Watching from Olongapo City. Ayan. Thank you po, mga taga-Olongapo. Philip Villame, hello, Tia. Tuanku Maharanee and Derek Irwina, good evening po sa ating lahat. Ayan po. And again, kay Kim, sabi niya, good evening, Tuanku Maharanee and Derek. Also kay Jamie Del Rosario Tinga, pa-shoutout po kay po sa Del Rosario Tinga and Diggs family of Olongapo. Ayan, so magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Lahat ho ng ating mga taga-subaybay. Yes, wag ho kayong magsawa na magtingin sa aming mga beauty dito. Ayan, joke lang po. Maraming salamat po sa inyong oras, sa inyong pagsama sa amin, at sana po marami kayong matutunan at marami tayong matuklasan. Ayan, so balik tayo doon sa ating topic. Okay? Alam mo kapatid na Derek Irwina at Sister Marie, Ma'am Shi, no? At oo nga pala, bakit wala pa si Mami Divine? Ano kayo nangyari? Mami Divine, nasaan ka na? Anyway.
Yeah, oo. Palagay siguro, baka kanina kasi may problema si Twinkle sa signal at saka sa audio. Kaya siguro nag-aayos pa yun. Inaayos pa siguro niya yung audio nila. So, okay. Mami Divine, habol ka na lang. Okay, no problem. Kahit late ka na, basta humabol ka na lang.
Yes, tama po. So, yun po, yung pinag-usapan natin is yung mga experience, yung alam natin na mga nangyari po dito sa time ni Marcos, especially yung kanyang pag-declare ng martial law. Sa totoo lang, hindi naman po may pagkakaila talaga na maraming na-tortured, maraming namatay, maraming na-detain, at kung ano-ano pa talaga ang experience na nangyari ng ating mga kababayan. No? Masakit isipin yon. Pero kung titingnan natin yung desisyon ni Marcos at that height po ng insurgency na yon.
Ayan!
Ayan! Hi!
Ayan si Mami Divine.
Hi, Ma'am Shi. Parang nasa ano kayo mobiling ka ba? Nasa labas ka ba?
Nasa labas po.
Ay na, kawawa naman kayo. Ayan. Sige, bumati ka na. Bati na.
Hello po mga kakampi at mga kadiwa. Good evening po sa inyong lahat. Hello po, Derek Arlina. And good evening po. And hello po, Madame Princess Maharanee. Good evening po.
Ayan. Ayan. So, ipagpatuloy natin yung ating usapin about sa martial law. Alam nyo kasi mga kakampi at mga kabangsa Melayu, especially po yung ating mga new generation na nakikinig ngayon, na sumasabay po sa atin, kayo po na mga kabataan ay marami po sa inyo halos basta Bangsa Melayu kid, or what I mean is Maharlikan Filipino kid, or mga new generation or ang tawag nila is millennial, kayo pong lahat ay matatalino. Hindi ho matatawaran yung inyong mga wisdom, yung inyong mga talent, yung mga skills ninyo, kaya dapat ho din po kayong makialam at sumaliksik kung ano ang katotohanan sa ating history. 'Di ba? Huwag ho tayong mag-rely sa ating nababasa sa social media, nakikita sa social media, or nababasa natin doon sa mga articles. Kailangan ho natin saliksikin yon. Kung halimbawa lang, meron tayong nakita na, ganito pala yung panahon na ganito, ganyan-ganyan. So, we have to prove it, no? We have to dig beyond para matuklasan natin kung ano ang katotohanan. 'Di ba? Para sa aking mga kapatid, at meron ditong shout out or maybe message ata si Kuya Chess, sabi niya pa, yung kamag-anak niya na si Ramos, na ipinagkatiwala niya ang, Philippine Constabulary at Metrocom, tama, na sa pag-aakala niya, Marcos ay maaasahan niya. Pagkakaala daw ni Marcos na maaasahan niya, iyon pala ay kabaliktaran ang ginawa para wasakin ang magandang imahe ni Marcos, para sa hangarin na maagaw kay Marcos ang poder ng gobyerno. Ang mga report na ibinibigay o nakakarating kay Marcos marahil ay mga good report yun pala worse pala ang ipinapagawa para mawasak si Pangulong Marcos. Actually po, may point po kayo dyan. Yun nga yung sabi ko kanina sa umpisa, na minsan, kung sino pa yung ating pinagkakatiwalaan, na akala natin ay yun ang magiging guardian angel natin, na yun ang magiging kakampi natin, no? Ay yun din pala ang tatraidor sa atin. At yan po ay hindi ho yan makukontest dahil kahit sino po sa atin, mga kakampi at mga kabangsa Melayu, na-experience natin yan. Even mismo sa ating mga kamag-anak, na kung sino pa yung pinagkakatiwalaan mo, yun pa yung tutuka sa'yo. I mean, yun pa yung sisira sa'yo. 'Di ba? So, usual, that is normal sa ating buhay. Ngunit, tayo na mga Pilipino, tayo ngayon na nandito ngayon sa sitwasyon na to, alam niyo kung bakit ko ito finiture sa heritage? Kasi kasaysayan ito eh. This is history, mga kabangsa Melayu. Huwag ho natin ito ibaliwala dahil napakahalaga po sa ating buhay ang mga history ng ating buhay, ng ating pinagdaanan, na ang kasaysayan ng ating mga pinuno ay mapagkukunan po natin ng inspiration, mapagkukunan po natin ng lesson kung sakali man tayo po ay nasa posisyon na rin. Kasi ang destiny po natin sa buhay ay wala pong may hawak nito. Kung hindi, sadyang ang Diyos lang po ang nakakaalam. Dahil siya lang po ang napaka matalino at siya lang po ang merong say at hawak niya kung ano ang magiging destiny ng bawat nilalang. Maniniwala ba kayo doon, kapatid ko? Tama ba yon? Ayan, so...
Yes. Tama yun.
Ayan. So, kaya po, nakita ko kay Marcos ang kahalagahan ng kanyang nasasakupan. Kung bakit siya nag-declare ng martial law, it's because gusto lang niya maproteksyonan ang safety ng mga tao. Dahil hindi na niya mahuhold yung trabaho ng bawat grupo. At kung ang sinasabi nila ay propaganda ito, sa tingin ko, wala sana nangyaring mga ganong experience o mga ganong patayan o di kaya yung mga grupo na binubuo ng mga ilang leaders, di ba? So sa tingin ko kung ito ay propaganda, siguro walang iminileft, walang ilaga, walang black shirt, walang NPA, walang komunista, di ba? Kapatid ko,
Yes. Tama po.
Kung talagang wala ngang threat sa ating security noon sa ating bansa, sa tingin ko hindi ganun si Marcos, no? Para sa akin lang hindi po ako maka-Marcos, sa totoo lang. Hindi ako maka-Marcos noon, pero ngayon Hindi ko alam. Kasi ito nga, pinapakialaman natin yung kasaysayan, tinitingnan natin, tinutuklas natin kung ano ang katotohanan. Pero sa tingin ko, sa mga nakita ko, sa mga na-research ko, sa totoo lang, sila po ay binahiran ang kanilang pamilya, binahiran ang leadership po ni Marcos ng walang katotohanan. 'Di ba? Alam niyo ano
Yes.
ano ang masasabi ko na ito ay lahat propaganda. Yung ginawa sa kanila, yung pag-exile nila, yung pag-oust sa kanila, at the time na nasa EDSA yung mga tao, siya mismo nagsabi na huwag kay Fabian Bear, sinabi niya na huwag i-shoot ang mga tao. Disperse from shooting them. Sino yung them? Yung mga tao na nasa EDSA. Kung talagang siya po ay diktador, sa tingin ko, walang snap election. Di ba, kapatid?
Yes, that's right.
Oh,
Tama
diktador
yun.
ka ba? Oh, kung diktador ka, kayang-kaya mo i-dictate sa lahat ng legislature kung anong gusto mong mangyari. Pero hindi. Nagpa-snap election siya, di ba?
Tama po yun.
Oh. So isang sample po yun, kung tayo po ay matatalinong tao at meron tayong iniisip, oo na, inaamin, ako at tinatanggap ko, lahat naman tayo hindi perpekto 'di ba? Lahat ng leaders, lahat ng tao sa mundo ay hindi perpekto. Wala pong perpekto. Sadyang ang Diyos lang po ang perpekto. Ngayon,
Yes, tama po yan.
kung ano yung mga pinagdaanan po noon ng ating mga leaders, na sa tingin natin ay nabahiran ng propaganda o nabahiran po ng politika, tayo po ngayon ay may utak, matalino po tayo, at wag na ho tayo magpalinlang pa. So this time, papakita ho namin sa inyo yung isang video na kung saan po yung life ni Marcos when they were exiled in Hawaii. Kung paano sila tinanggap ng mga tao doon at kung paano nangyari. At itong video na to napakaganda ha. Hindi, sa tingin ko para sa akin, sa basa ko lang, hindi po ito bias. Dahil kinukuha rin yung mga side po ng mga Aquino. So, Direk Josh, please roll the video.
I was no Marie Antoinette.
400 cars, 3,000 pairs of shoes for the ex-beauty queen wife.
I don't think anybody ever thought that the whole political problem in the Philippines would end up in our backyard.
The plunder of the ages.
If you've ever wanted to know what a revolution looks like, feast your eyes on Manila tonight.
They basically fled the country. This was their home now.
Do you still consider yourself president?
Of course. I have not resigned.
And all the while millions of his people lived in filth and disease, Marcos and his family lived in glittering splendor.
It was totally divisive, and it hurt the community a lot.
They knew how to manipulate the system.
It is very good that we have the Filipino people supporting them here. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened to them.
Exile in Hawaii has been less paradise than purgatory for the Marcoses.
We are barely surviving here.
She's excellent at playing the victim.
This is so cruel, so inhuman, and so immoral.
There's a little bit of Imelda in all of us.
When they went to my closet, not skeletons, but shoes.
For 2 decades, the duo of Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos dominated the Philippines. Ferdinand Marcos was a young, charismatic politician, his wife a beauty queen when they rose to power in 1965.
A political dynasty now more remembered for lavish spending than triumphs. Ferdinand and Imelda are accused of pillaging up to $10 billion from the Philippines people. Imelda, known as the Iron Butterfly, would become a notorious jet-setting socialite and fashion icon, amassing hundreds of millions in jewels, fine art, real estate, and the infamous stash of thousands of shoes. Her travels so luxurious, she once reportedly spent $2,000 on chewing gum during a layover in San Francisco. She even forced an airplane departing Rome to make a U-turn because she forgot to buy cheese.
Despite the outward opulence of her life, Imelda Marcos describes her 5 years in exile in terms that are at best bizarre.
As you will know, upon our arrival here in the United States, they deprive us of all of our, even our personal properties or valuables or things. I have been living really from the generosity of friends and relatives. In short, I have been living in welfare.
This is welfare.
The Marcos lifestyle, alleged corruption, and human rights violations now defining their legacy. But in the beginning, it did appear the power couple had good intentions.
And that was the first time that the Philippines had the best improvement.
Marcos launched major infrastructure projects, making him very popular in parts of the country, such as his home province of Ilocos Norte.
Before, we did not have any electricity. Before, we did not have running water.
That's how Joe Lazo, a Philippines native and Honolulu businessman, became loyal to the president.
I really appreciate the president, and I give him due respect too for doing what he did.
But the reformer gave way to the strong man. Shrewd and ruthless, Marcos declared martial law in 1972. Closed newspapers, jailed political foes, turned parliament into a rubber stamp.
They do not appreciate Marcos because of martial law. But to us people who are benefited with martial law, admire Marcos very much. We love Marcos. That's why I said I can debate anybody until now about martial law, any place, anywhere. And we were the only state that were celebrating martial law.
So, well, they consider him like a local boy who made good, who cared for them, who became president, who did a lot for Ilocos Norte, where he was. So there's that kind of ethnic, maybe even feudal kind of relationship. It's like a master a slave kind of relationship.
Former University of Hawaii professor Dr. Belinda Aquino has written many publications about what she calls the plunder of the ages.
He ought to be brought to justice. He ought to be punished for his crimes. He was the head of a regime that had killed lots of Filipinos, made about 10,000 Filipinos disappear over a number of years.
During that era, even as millions of their people lived in poverty, the Marcoses enjoyed the good life.
Land, skyscrapers, and stock literally around the world. A personal fortune estimated at $5 billion. Nearly all of it siphoned from the Philippine treasury. U.S. presidents bankrolled Marcos because he was an ardent anti-communist who let the U.S. keep vital military bases in the Philippines.
In the midst of the Vietnam War, America was worried about the spread of communism in Asia.
As I stand on American soil and I see the doubts rising in Asia, I see another phenomenon that clears my mind. It is the phenomenon of an American nation led by a new leadership, earnestly exerting heroic efforts in order to stop the slide.
So in that spirit, let me offer a toast
to the President, Mrs. Marcos, and to the people of the Philippines, and to the mutual respect, the dedication to peace and security in the world, and the shared values which unite us.
Your relationship as the first couple of the Philippines has been described as a partnership. Do you see it that way?
Well, I wouldn't say to that extent partnership, because the presidency is always in the lead. The First Lady is only there as a helpmate and someone who is supportive to whatever is the need. I would describe it perhaps that he makes the house, and I hope to make it a home.
And she knew that without him, she couldn't have the luxury or the power. And you know, sometimes I think it's quite unfair that they only sort of associate luxury and the finer things in life to her. And you know, she actually did a lot of good things for the country, and that's the part that you never hear about. And so as much as she had the glamour aura, you know, there were some things that was very close to her heart, and so you just never heard too much about that.
Well, frankly, I feel that Marcos should have stepped down sooner than now. I mean, it's pathetic that we had a demented president for so long.
When the economy, he and his cronies were accused of plundering, collapsed, and when Marcos loyalists were widely believed to have gunned down opposition leader Senator Benigno Aquino, the president's legitimacy was finished. In 1983, just minutes after returning to the Philippines from a 3-year exile, Aquino was assassinated at the Manila airport. He was the political rival of President Marcos and spent years in prison on charges of subversion. Aquino's death, for which the Marcos regime was blamed, ignited the people power revolution that led to Ferdinand's downfall. In 1986, violence in the streets, accusations of cheating, and the dodgy human rights record led Marcos to call for a snap election. To the surprise of many in the Philippines and around the world, he lost to the late Senator Aquino's widow, Cory, a defeat Marcos was not willing to accept.
The final hours of Ferdinand Marcos at the presidential palace in Manila. Thousands of loyalists cheering the failing dictator, who was soon to be told by his American friends to cut and run. Scenes faithfully preserved by his personal camera crews, as they'd done countless times before. When Marcos fled, the palace tapes remained behind, an intriguing and potentially incriminating collection. Hundreds of hours of recorded history broadcast to glorify the deposed dictator. Hundreds more hours of private tapes, yet to be seen or analyzed by the new government. Extravagant parties on the presidential yacht, decadent by the standards of this Catholic nation. First Lady Imelda Marcos dancing last fall with then U.S. Consul General Vernon McCanage. The First Lady giving presents to the Catholic hierarchy at the palace last Christmas. The world saw Marcos welcome General Fabian Ver back to the fold last fall after the military was acquitted in the murder of opposition politician Benigno Aquino. But the palace withheld these pictures of the ex-president greeting the other alleged conspirators, one of whom has again been accused as the killer of the new president's husband. In many ways, the Aquino murder was the beginning of the end for Marcos, coupled with the economic disaster he and his cronies created. Disaster and despair measured by the growing number of people who find their daily bread in the garbage dumps. And that is why this party aboard the presidential yacht will interest the people too. A birthday party last September for daughter Irene, the last time Marcos was aboard the vessel. Ferdinand Jr., nicknamed Bong Bong, governor of the family's home province, is the man in the flashing bow tie. There was food and dancing and live music, including the revelers' version of a song that last year was a rallying cry to feed the poor. This version is memorable for its enthusiasm. Memorable, too, because the former First Family and their friends didn't realize how hungry their own people were. Hungry for political change at the very least.
What kept coming up was that they were betrayed.
Emmy Tomingbang worked in Hawaii as a TV reporter and was able to use her connections to get exclusive access to the Marcos camp.
They couldn't believe that America would come in, step into their country, and of course America's interest was all the bases, and that they would go to this, extreme to remove them. And so I'm not saying I felt sorry for them, but this was a very major development that they had to live with for 7 years. The closest thing that the president said to me was that he trusted the people around him. And looking back, he wished he didn't.
A nation took to the streets tonight to celebrate its victory. The dictator had fallen, the people conquered his palace. For a generation, it had been the forbidden city in the Philippines. Tonight it was renamed Freedom Park. If you've ever wanted to know what a revolution looks like, feast your eyes on Manila tonight.
But the Americans were intervening in that whole situation. We'll give him asylum, and just so we will not have the kind of violent situation there. After all, Americans were so proud about the Philippines having been a showcase of democracy in the Far East.
As troops loyal to Marcos filed out of the palace, they were embraced as converts by the gathering crowd. There was pandemonium as word spread that the dictator was gone. There was bloodshed, very little bloodshed. The day that started with two presidents and two sides ended with a coming together that mingled prayer and patriotism, which tonight were the same thing. They waved their flags, they kissed their flags. The Virgin Mary was everywhere. They tore down the barbed wires surrounding the palace and fashioned it into crowns of thorns. The stately portraits of the old regime were replaced late tonight by Hollywood-type posters of the new leaders, the new Philippines, starring Corazon Aquino, who tonight spoke with the voice of her nation.
We are finally free, and we can be truly proud of the unprecedented way we achieved our freedom, with courage and with determination, and most important, in peace.
It's to the credit of Filipinos to have pulled that revolution on a 4-day timeline, which is considered the shortest revolution in history.
This is about as happy as people can get. This was the revolution that smiled.
I don't think we really knew that we're going to end up here someday. At least I didn't. In fact, it was rather chilling for me to think that I knew this person as president, and now he was stripped off of everything and living with us in Hawaii.
For anti-Marcos forces, developments in the Philippines appeared to bring them one step closer to victory. They say that after 20 years, they are no longer the underdog.
We're not the opposition in Hawaii, but very soon we're going to be representing the establishment, the Philippine establishment, because things are changing so fast.
The revolution led to confusion here in Honolulu as the pictures of Ferdinand and Imelda still hung at the Philippine Consul General. Air travel was disrupted and families huddled around the TV set on edge.
If this were a newspaper picture, the caption might read, Imelda and Ferdinand in happier days. They were here in Hawaii, and it was 1 year before the assassination of Benigno Aquino. During their official visits here, local Filipinos have been bussed into events as a show of support. About 3/4 of island Filipinos have ties to Marcos's home province of Ilocos. There has been absolutely no word from Philippine or American or local officials that Marcos has made contingency plans to come here. But speculation is rampant here that Honolulu would be his first choice as a new home.
Because he will feel at home here, because there's a lot of Ilocanos, a lot of Filipinos here in proportion with the population in the United States.
But then when they were driven out of the palace, Reagan promised them, if they come to Hawaii, they will live in heaven. So when they arrived in Honolulu, Reagan did not do anything. And so Mrs. Marcos, every time we had meetings with Mrs. Marcos, President Reagan was telling us we will live in Honolulu in heaven, but we are living in hell.
When Ferdinand Marcos stepped off the plane at Hickam Air Force Base, he was a man without a country, cast adrift in a hostile world, desperately searching for an outstretched hand after fleeing a country he once ruled with an iron fist.
Marcos fled to Hawaii with his family and friends, landing on Oahu in February of 1986.
Only news people and security personnel waited for Marcos and his party this morning at Hickam Air Force Base. Nothing like the throngs of cheering supporters that have greeted the Filipino leader in his previous visits here. The 89 people traveling in the Marcos party made the trip from Guam in an Air Force C-141 that touched down just after 11 this morning. The official greeting party was small. Governor and Mrs. Ariyoshi and Commander of the Pacific Air Forces, General Robert Baisley, and his wife. A frail-looking Marcos needed some help deplaning, but once off, the 68-year-old president in exile was able to walk slowly by himself. There was a warm greeting between the Ariyoshis and the Marcoses, the welcome complete with leis. Later, Ariyoshi told reporters he found Marcos to be in good spirits, relaxed and hoping to get some rest here. He did not think Marcos was depressed or bitter.
I didn't get that from him. I didn't get the feeling that he felt bad about having to leave the country and being almost stripped from the presidency. I think that he feels that he was happy that things happened without any real bloodshed. He was concerned about Filipinos being turned against Filipinos and lots of bloodshed, and he did not want to see that happen.
He said the Marcoses left in haste.
The son, for example, pointed out that he didn't have very much the clothing, and one of the daughters indicated to me that that was the only clean clothes that they had.
And they got obviously permission to come here, but it's a new place for them.
Jim McCoy was a local reporter assigned to the Marcos beat.
There was a number of people that supported them here, and there was a number of people that opposed them here. So it was a big story, you know, for weeks and months.
My beloved countrymen, I'm now in Hickam Air Force Base.
With that, Ferdinand Marcos, his wife Imelda at his side, read what he described as a letter to the Filipino people. It contained Marcos's version of his downfall. He never conceded losing control of the country he ruled for 20 years.
This situation came to a point that although I had control of superior military power and several opportunities to employ this military power, the employment of such an overwhelming force, no matter how legitimate, would have resulted in the bloody carnage among innocent civilians.
We got the word at some point during the day that they're definitely staying on Hickam that night. So that's when I decided to make a call. I had a very good source in federal law enforcement who I presume was there, and he was there. And that's where I said, anything interesting happened? And he told me about the jewelry in the Pampers boxes. Now, I remember calling the newsroom and saying, do we have video of Pampers boxes coming off the plane?
It was reported today that Marcos and his group arrived in Honolulu carrying large amounts of cash, gold, and valuables, and that more items, including land titles and stocks, arrived today from the Philippines.
But we heard that President Reagan was not happy about, you know, the Pampers and the jewelry in the Pampers boxes, because it was like, kind of like, it was about, you know, well, they're fleeing their home country, but they're bringing all the loot with them, you know, that kind of thing. So that was part of it too.
The group that's been known for months as the Friends of Cory Aquino has changed its name to the Coalition of Concerned Filipino Americans in Hawaii. Some of their leaders gathered to hear Marcos's comments today. They didn't like what they heard. They called it a charade.
We had sort of hoped that he would have the wisdom to move on to another place where his presence would be less divisive.
Had questions been allowed, Marcos would surely have been asked about the personal belongings he brought to Hawaii. Some reports indicate Marcos may have with him as much as $4 million in various assets, which coalition members think he may use for political maneuvering.
So you can assume that he has the ability and the resources to bankroll a movement, that would probably undermine the Aquino government.
By the time they were exiled, the Marcoses were estimated to have amassed assets worth anywhere between $5 to $10 billion. They are now famous for holding the Guinness World Record for the greatest robbery of a government. Much of that fortune is still missing, and that's led to a decades-long legal battle for Honolulu attorney Sherry Broder, who's still trying to recover the money.
I told my husband, can't we sue him, for human rights abuses? And my husband was a law professor of international law, and this was really his field. And he said, yeah, we can. And so we decided that we would do a case if there was a plaintiff that was interested. So we actually had talked to Belinda Aquino about it.
Aquino informed government officials in Manila about the money and goods allegedly brought here by Marcos. She says the head of the Philippine Commission for Good Government immediately hired a Honolulu attorney to try to impound the goods. Belinda Aquino, in turn, was named presidential designate to represent the Commission on Good Government here in Hawaii.
To look into the hidden wealth or investments abroad made by former associates of Mr. Marcos, as well as Mr. Marcos himself in the United States, of which there is ample documentation.
People power becomes panic at the palace gate. A mad rush to get in and see what Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos left behind. Today was the day of the poor. Manila's slum dwellers summoned by President Corazon Aquino to see the extravagant lifestyle of the palace. Aquino has refused to live there.
It is really sad that the previous occupants neglected the needs of the Filipino people.
Filipinos who used to be kept blocks from the Marcoses' private universe got a 20-minute kaleidoscope of unimaginable luxury.
Wow!
Including the former First Lady's 10-foot wide bed.
That's why a lot of people here in the Philippines are starving.
Fantastic. Ray Reblora and his wife Sally often go to bed hungry, trying to live on their $17 a week income. Their first baby is due any day. Their palace, homemade out of scrap, is smaller than Imelda Marcos' bed. As far as Ray is concerned, the Marcoses belong in jail.
He can come back here in the Philippines to face what he do to the people of the Philippines.
Ray and Sally's wardrobe consists of a few extra shirts. They were stunned by Imelda's storeroom of 2,700 pairs of shoes and hundreds of designer gowns. The anger is compelling. So many people were trying to get in today that children were in danger of being crushed. The government said that from now on, passes will be issued to hold down the number of daily visitors to the bitter exhibit of Marcos memorabilia.
Well, let me tell you one story, and maybe it'll give you a good idea of how we were able to try to chase down money.
The 1899 artwork by French Impressionist Claude Monet is at the center of one of those fights to find the funds.
On the day that the Marcoses were overthrown in the Philippines, somebody came with a U-Haul to the apartment up in the Upper East Side or Upper West Side of New York City, and supposedly all the paintings that were in there were loaded in the U-Haul and taken away. Nobody had ever seen them again or knew where they went or what happened to them.
Then the Monet painting suddenly surfaced. It was discovered that Vilma Bautista, a confidant and personal secretary of Imelda Marcos, sold the painting. She got into trouble with the law for not paying taxes on the deal.
She then claimed that Imelda Marcos had given her that painting. Of course, she must have been quite an excellent secretary if she got a $40 million gift. So we immediately got involved in the whole dispute going on. About who it belonged to and who it didn't belong to. So in that particular situation, the buyer of the Monet painting settled with us.
Then there was the jewelry, which is still to this date a point of contention.
It's a wonderful collection. It has a huge variety of pieces. There are some truly exceptional items in this collection.
The jewels discovered in those now infamous Pampers boxes has become known as the Hawaii Collection. Containing diamonds, tiaras, bracelets, and gemstone necklaces, it is worth millions. The collection has been locked up in a bank vault for decades, but that's about to change. After years of legal debate, the Philippines government now plans to auction off the collection in an attempt to reclaim the ill-gotten gains. Current President Rodrigo Duterte, who was reportedly allied with the Marcoses, okayed the sale in 2019. He had canceled the initial auction after taking office back in 2016.
I was no Marie Antoinette. I was not born to nobility.
The Marcos family denies any wrongdoing when it comes to the Treasury's theft. But if they didn't take it, where did the money go? And how did they get so rich? Imelda has struggled with that question in many interviews.
If some pieces of land he would buy for 1 peso, today it's 2,000 pesos. So even that, things like those appreciate. And then you buy, 25 years ago, I bought a piece of land worth 30 pesos. Now it is 3,000 pesos. 21 years ago, 22 years ago, I bought a piece of land, 50 centavos, and now it's 300, 500 pesos. If you have good investment, things like that work more. But people do not think that things do, as I said, even age appreciate.
Imelda has made claims that the bulk of her husband's fortune originated from an elusive buried treasure known as Yamashita's gold, but the loot's existence has been dismissed by many experts. Cut off from their deep pockets and stuck in a diplomatic limbo, back in 1986, the Marcoses struggled to find a place to call home in Hawaii.
The former Philippine president arrived at 5577 Kalani Anaoli Highway around 8:30 last night. It was the first time Marcos had left Hickam Air Force Base since he and a party of about 90 arrived here from Manila 27 days ago. Last night's move was made with the assistance of Secret Service agents, U.S. Air Force personnel, and plainclothes officers of the Honolulu Police Department. And it didn't take very long for the first protesters to arrive. Honolulu attorney Eric Seitz and a friend showed up with protest signs less than an hour after the Marcoses moved in.
Frankly, I've always been offended by the United States support for Marcos, but I'm even more offended by the fact that he's here in Niu Valley, or that he isn't being sent back to the Philippines to face the legitimate feelings of the Filipino people, who I think would hang him if he were sent back.
Marcos moves into my neighborhood, something clicked, and I said, that's too much, that's it, I gotta come out with my sign, I gotta show everybody I oppose it, he's a murderer, he's a dictator, he's a fascist, what can you say?
Secret Service here? Hey, cut it out, I'm going with you. Stop it!
Seitz was detained briefly by the Secret Service because his protest sign included an indirect threat. He was taken into the house and questioned, but later released without charges. It's not certain how long Ferdinand and Imelda planned to live in the 4-bedroom beachfront house, but they were clearly running out of time at Hickam Air Force Base. They had been promised security and housing for up to a month. They're on their own now in a rented home, but the security remains in place. Efforts to find the Marcoses a safe haven in another country have so far been unsuccessful.
Not everyone saw the Marcos regime as an evil dictatorship. In an attempt to capitalize on that support, the couple began to make some rare but dramatic appearances around Honolulu.
We want Marcos! We
They have a name for themselves, these people who carpooled and rode buses and walked to a street corner in Old Kalihi, where the president of the group Friends of Marcos has a travel agency. They call themselves the Silent Majority, Ilocanos with ties to Marcos's home province in Ilocos Norte, transplanted Filipinos who say they have until now quietly borne the indignities of exaggerated and false reporting about their hero.
Oh yeah, they always take time. They would not leave until the people leaves. Oh yeah, because this is the first time that the Filipino people see them. And of course they like to see them, and of course they like Mrs. Marcos and President Marcos would like to see them too.
Most media really in Hawaii are all for Aquino, pro-Aquinos, not all for Marcos at all.
The wealthy, sure, that's a president. I mean, who doesn't? President Reagan lives in the White House.
Nobody, how much you poison our mind, we are still loyal to him. He's the best president the Philippines has ever had.
It was a crowd that Imelda Marcos knew would be more than receptive. She wore the same simple dress that she wore when she and her husband faced the cameras for a news conference at Hickam, and she offered herself for press-the-flesh populism. The crowd surged forward to envelop her in support, to comfort her. And when the crowd pressed too close for comfort, supporters moved to protect her, targeting the big TV news cameras first.
Well, I think for her it was maybe a level of comfort that she can amass this kind of reaction outside of her own country. So, you know, I mean, all you're doing is playing it on a smaller stage, but it's the same routine. And she was always genuinely very open to her people.
She was helped onto an old table and the crowd saluted her. She was not there to talk with reporters, but Newsroom 9 got in a couple of quick questions in the highly charged atmosphere.
Ms. Marcos, could you tell me how you feel to be in this country?
Homesick.
Do you have anything to say to Filipinos here who feel not as happy as these Filipinos?
I and do not intend to return to the Philippines unless I am needed there. If my return will start a civil war, the answer is no.
So what would it take for you to go back to the Philippines?
What do you think? It would be a call by the people themselves. I don't intend to go there voluntarily offering my services and insisting that I be president.
But it never happened. I mean, you know, there was never a moment, there was never a time when we thought he was actually going to leave. I mean, you know, or be allowed to go back to the Philippines.
After many attempts to move to another country failed, the Marcoses remained in Hawaii until Ferdinand's death in 1989 at the age of 72.
Imelda Marcos was wrapping up an interview yesterday when she got the call. There was another crisis. Her husband's heart had stopped. Imelda went rushing to St. Francis Hospital.
So much to be done in all fronts, for country, for your home, for your needs, for your health.
By the time she got to St. Francis, Ferdinand Marcos was on an internal pacemaker. His condition seemed to stabilize, raising the possibility that he would once again rally. But as the evening wore on, hope began to dim. Doctors kidney and lung failure and a widespread infection added to the cardiac arrest that led to Marcos's death. That came shortly after the arrival from California of Marcos's son, Ferdinand Jr., who's known as Bong Bong.
When Bong Bong arrived, I think he felt that his son was there, so he opened his eyes. And after opening his eyes, that was it. His accomplishments are beyond imagination. As I said, I am very sure every Filipino, they might not realize it now, but I'm very sure every Filipino will say that President Marcos was the greatest president, and history will prove this.
And she carried herself, I guess like the way Jackie Kennedy did after the president died, American President Kennedy died, She just held her level to that standard, and more so after he died. You can imagine what was going through her mind and her heart, but she now sort of felt like this is her time to kind of speak for him or to take his place, and she was, she did that.
The president will never leave my heart and will never die as far as I'm concerned. He will always be there. In fact, he will be all the time there. In spirit, of course. But when you have become so intimately involved with another human being, there can never be a separation again.
Good afternoon, it's 12:58. You're on KISS AM Radio. It is true, and a lot of people have been in shock about what has happened over the last 8 to 10 hours.
This radio station is the only one here that caters to Filipinos. And today its switchboards lit up. Some people were angry that the flags at the Philippine consulate will not be flown at half-staff.
Since President Marcos was the sixth president and Aquino was only a senator, and they did that to Aquino, why can't they do that to ex-President Marcos?
Some say his body should be allowed home.
Can we do something about it, or we cannot do nothing? Here in Hawaii, we cannot do anything about it.
Following his death, President Corazon Aquino would not allow entry of Marcos's remains into the Philippines.
I have always considered only one thing, his wish, and the wish of every Filipino to be buried and led to rest in peace in his motherland.
So much has happened since the death of Ferdinand Marcos less than 24 hours ago. More recently, his body was made available for viewing, as a deluge of reporters was allowed into the Marcos home. Leading the way, Imelda Marcos, still fighting for her husband's right to return to the Philippines.
How can you find this man dangerous to security when he is now resting in peace forever?
Imelda Marcos now stands alone against criminal charges for allegedly looting her country of billions. She will vindicate herself, she says, once she resolves the long-standing issue of whether Marcos's body can return to his homeland.
This is so cruel, so inhuman, and so immoral.
His rule changed our country beyond recognition. In what ways he changed it, I leave to others and to history to describe.
But when I came to Manila, I had an interview with President Aquino. And I never forget this. I said, I can't remember everything, but I remember, how can you not allow him to come back? I mean, if he's already deceased, what's the big deal? That was my question. And she was very strong and said, basically, dead or alive, if he returns, it will create upheaval in our country. And I have to be aware of that. And I went, oh, okay. Because that's how strong Marcos was. And she knew it. And she wasn't gonna, make light of it. So she said, basically, no, I'm not gonna let him come back.
He not only stole and killed and did all those nasty things, robbing the country blind, but he let down a whole country that had, for a long time, experience with democratic institutions. So he was a classic dictator in that sense. And, he got his due deserts when he was overthrown, and he died in obscurity.
Still, the world wanted to know what happened to the money and would the Marcoses be held accountable. Imelda Marcos would face a highly publicized trial in New York City on charges that she raided the country's treasury and invested the money in the United States. She was acquitted.
It is the most publicized return to the Philippines since General Douglas MacArthur's during World War II.
Marcos, how are you feeling? Very excited and very happy.
Imelda Marcos.
You're not afraid? No.
And her entourage are leaving New York. Where are you going this morning? What's your schedule?
To the airport.
But it's not that simple.
Bye-bye, Mr. Marcos.
You've been through so much in this country. What should we think of Imelda Marcos?
I think now that they're starting to see the real Imelda, what is in my heart, not only the packaging outside. When I was deprived of country and everything, people started to relate to the real me.
Be careful. Be careful. Careful on the ground. This way.
Not the symbol, but the real Imelda. I am truly very grateful to this country for making me real.
It was a long flight, and we all thought about the same thing. What was it going to be like when we landed? I think I'm going to get blown up in this plane with her. And no, we didn't. The whole airport was filled with their supporters.
Keep going, keep moving, keep moving.
Just like General MacArthur, Imelda Marcos has returned. She is fighting her own war for the hearts and minds of Filipinos.
We love Imelda. Yeah. Always.
The same Filipinos who threw her out of the country 5 years ago.
The Marcoses stole money from the Philippines. Yeah, he stole the money. No.
And while she is delighted to face the crowds in the streets, she also must face charges in court.
Kung down daw sa New York, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
What was your feelings about her being allowed to go back to the Philippines and then rise to power again?
It's not so much what she thinks about what everybody thinks, but how is it that Filipinos in that part of the world is still elected her to a position of power again? But you see, as I said, the relationship was just so that they still continued to hold power, even when they were out of real power. They had still so much money, they still had so much influence.
The people in the islands know what Marcos did for our country, you see. That is why they supported him. And that's why the people love Marcos even now, until now.
Well, I think it's very upsetting that they're still in power, but the money that they've hidden and that they still have access to is money that they use to keep themselves in power.
So you kind of knew that it ain't over. It ain't over well from that. And I'm hoping that Imelda's children, who are now in positions of power, will have learned from what they had to grow up and experience, all the things that they were accused of doing, their parents, that they can learn from that and be better about it and not repeat history.
We all know Imelda Marcos, right? Her famous shoe collection. Well, apparently it's ruined. More than 1,200 pairs of shoes were left in storage after the one-time First Lady fled the country in 1986. Officials say over the years, the shoes were damaged by termites, mold, and storms. Those shoes, of course, were seen as a symbol of the excesses and corruption of her husband's.
Ayan. Ayan, sobrang...
Grabe, nakakaiyak yun
I was touched talaga, kapatid. At alam mo, yung feeling ni Mrs. Imelda, parang parang nafi-feel ko yun eh. Alam mo, sobrang sobrang parang ang feeling niya wala siyang matakbuhan na iba, 'di ba?
Yes.
Sobrang sakit nung naranasan nila, pero nakita niyo naman kung gaano siya focus sa kanyang sarili, napaka-strong pa rin niya, no, bilang asawa. Despite of all those belittling them, defaming them, lahat na lang ng hindi magandang salita na ubos sa kanila. At doon ako natatawa, kapatid, sa isang party ni Belinda Aquino na sinasabi niya na meron siyang ginawang libro with the title of Plunder Ages, no? At
Yes.
gumawa daw siya ng 300 documents, no? Government documents, 300,000 documents na kung saan meron pa daw silang 95 witnesses para lang talagang idiin itong mga Marcoses na nag-present. Kumbaga pa, ang Aquino nag-present ng 95 na mga tao para idiin si Marcos doon sa kanilang pagiging corrupt, pagiging kung ano-ano mamamatay tao, lahat na lang. Pero ang nakakaano doon, ang irony doon, kapatid, the case was dismissed.
Yes.
Because
Evidence, yes.
Yes, kapatid. Anong masasabi niyo doon sa video na yun? Sige.
Na alam mo mahal kong kapatid, Mami Divine and Mami Marie. Nalungkot talaga ako, no? Ngayon gusto kong may i-share sa inyo. Ako hindi, wala akong pinapanigan. Gusto ko lang i-share sa inyo yung sarili kong karanasan, no? Kasi ako dati, way back ng Aquino administration, ako ay assistant ng isang general manager ng Stork Philippines, no? Pardon me, ayokong ikwento to, but I have to do this because in fairness naman, di ba? During the time na yung general manager na to, hindi ko nababanggitin ang pangalan, during that time, malapit na magpasko, no? Malapit na magpasko, and si Imelda Marcos ay humingi ng, I think, 7 truck. Sa pagkaka-intindi ko, no, pagkaka-recalling ko, 7 truck ng candy sa company na to, no? But thinking na sinasabi nila na, thinking na yung general manager was thinking na babayaran sila, so binigyan niya ng 7 truck ng candy, no? But unfortunately, hindi ito na ibigay sa kanya. Noong una, nagagalit siya. He was really telling me about that. But, nakita niya na itong mga candy to, never ibinenta ni Imelda Marcos or what, ito ay ipinamigay niya sa mga bata dahil malapit na magpasko noon. Ipinamigay niya itong mga candy na to doon sa mga mahihirap na bata na nag-aantay ng kanilang mga Christmas gift sa araw ng Pasko. So mga kakampi, yan ay isang sharing ko sa inyo. Kaya ako kanina naiiyak. How can they accuse such a good person na wala siyang hinangad kundi ang kabutihan ng kanyang mga anak na mahihirap. Diba? Sa mga mayayaman, yes, maaaring ito ay isang kakainis. Diba? But kung titignan mo ang the bright side of it, ipinigay niya to sa higit na mas nangangailangan ng tulong. So, bahala kayong maghusga kung ano ang kwento kong ito. Kayo na ang magsalita ng comment nyo. Yun lang.
So, ikaw, Mami Divine, anong masasabi mo doon sa nanonood natin?
Ang masasabi ko dun sa video at sa paniniwala ko kasi sa Marcos kasi bilib ako sa kanila. Bilib ako sa family nila, lalong-lalo na rin kay Miss Imelda Marcos kasi saludo ako sa kanya kasi sobrang nakatayo pa rin siya sa kabila ng lahat ng mga pagsubok na dumating sa kanya. Bilang isang nanay at bilang isang asawa na nasa kalagitnaan ng ganong sitwasyon na ang hirap na dun sa sinasabi nilang kasi si ex-President Marcos kasi is for 20 years of service niya, hindi naman ako siguro naniniwala yung sa sinasabing corrupt kasi for 20 years ng service niya, siyempre marami na rin naman siyang kahit papano marami silang naipon at marami rin siya kasing sa lahat ng mga presidente, marami rin siyang naipagawa. Sa totoo lang, ang dami rin niyang na-develop ng mga projects, lalo na yung mga tulay, di ba? Ang dami niyang napagawang yung mga infrastructures. Marami siyang naipagawang mga projects at for 20 years of service, hindi naman kasi magtatagal ang pamumuno ng isang presidente ng ganong katagal kung walang nagtiwala sa kanya, ng paulit-ulit na nagtitiwala sa kanya. Hindi lang talaga may iwasan dito sa atin at kahit kaninong politician o pumasok na presidente, hindi mawawala yung basher, hindi mawawala yung walang kontento ang tao Kahit anong bait, kahit anong ganda ng pagsisilbi sa tao, may masasabi at kahit naman sa atin, kahit batay natin sa personal nating pagkatao, kahit anong ganda ng ipinakikita mo sa kapwa mo, you cannot please everybody talaga.
Totoo yan.
Hindi naman kumpleto ang buhay talaga. Laging may katapat na mga pagsubok kasi hindi natin makukumpleto yan. Hindi perfect ang buhay Laging may katapat na mga pagsubok. At sa bawat tagumpay kasi may mga pagsubok muna bago marating ang tagumpay ng buhay.
Yan, mga kakampi at mga kabangsa. Komento ng ating kapatid na si Direk Irwina at saka si Ma'am Shi Divine. How about you, Ma'am Sister Marie? Ano ang masasabi mo doon?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Tuanku Maharanee, ang masasabi ko lang ng pinapanood ko, ikaw ang naalaala ko. Ikaw ang parang nakikita ko sa katawan ni Mrs. Imelda Marcos.
Wow.
Nang sinabi niya, kahit namatay yung asawa niya, pero sa kanya buhay pa rin at hindi mamamatay kahit kailanman. At nakikita ko yan sa iyo, Tuanku Maharanee. Ang masasabi ko lang, kasi ako talaga, wala akong naranasan ng mga ganun. Tulad ng sinabi ko sa inyo, umalis ako maarpa.
Yes.
Ang nakikita ko lang doon, tama yung inaano ni Mami Divine na kung wala si President Marcos nagawa na mabuti, hindi naman siya siguro magtatagal ng ganun katagal. Lahat ng mga tao talaga, mayroon sasabihin talaga, mayroon kang gagawin masama, mayroon kang gagawin mabuti, may sasabihin talaga mga tao.
Correct.
Ang masasabi ko lang ganito na lang, to make my story short or to make my speech short, vote wisely. Thank you.
Yan mga kakapi at mga kabangsa Melayu. Napaka-clear po yung mga sinabi ng aking mga mamshis, no? At thank you so much sa inyong observation at sa inyong komento. Pero bago ako mag-komento doon sa nakita natin, gusto ko lang i-shout out itong ating mga ano dito, no? Ang sabi ni Evangeline Tingad kay Kuya Jesus pala, sabi niya, missing word. Ano ba yun? Saan na ba yun? Ayan. Kaya tanong ko lamang, bakit walang ginawang pagtuligsa kay President Ramos gayong kadugo ni Marcos ito? Bakit lahat tinutuligsa nila at pinaparatangan lahat ng mga kadugo ni Marcos? Di ba kadugo niya si Ramos? Ibininta halos lahat ng mga pag-aari ng bayan. May mapakinabangan ba kayo sa ipinangako nila na sila ang sagot ng kasagutan at mag-aahon sa bayan ng 25 years na mula nang inagaw nila, lalong naghirap ang mga tao ng kahit mga proyekto ay wala tayong makita. Kundi kay Marcos wala tayong mga hospital at hospital na milyon na. Ayan. Ang sabi ni AJ Mostrado Tinga, pa-shoutout po. Jennifer Hilot, shoutout ng GNG Group. Ayan. At saka ulit si Kuya Jesus, sabi niya, missing word at milyon na namamatay sa atin dahil sa pandemic na COVID kung walang mga hospital na ipinagawa ni Marcos. Tama naman. Totoo yan. At si Evangeline Dazatinga, sabi pa niya, ang malungkot na katotohanan noong Marcos regime kay Marcos was the third richest person in the world. Imelda landed 9th, considering that the Philippines was included in the list of the third world country. Then sabi ni Philip Villamil, kaya mas masahol ngayon ang termino ng presidente ang mga alipores, bilyonaryo na. Ayan. So marami pa po talagang dapat natin malaman, mga kakampi at mga kabangsa Melayu. Kasi kung tutuusin, si President Marcos, bilang siya yung pang-10 presidente ng ating bayang Pilipinas. At pinagurian siyang golden ages of the Philippines. No, hindi tama yung sabi ni Aquino na Plunder ages. Golden ages po ng Pilipinas yung time ni Marcos regime. Bakit ko nasabi?
Yes.
Bakit ko nasabi ito, mga mamshis? Because all the allegations was not proven until now. At na-acquit si Mrs. Marcos, 'di ba? At ang pinaka-importante dito na dapat natin balikan sa ating mga isip, sa ating mga kasaysayan na kung saan hindi po ito naiguhit sa anumang history book, no? Ngunit tayo po mismo ang dapat sumaliksik nito na kung saan itong sa time po ni President Marcos, ano ang pinaigting niya ng mga taon na yon na siya yung presidente? Hindi ba yung food security ng ating mamamayang Pilipino sa pamamagitan ng Green Revolution na kanyang programa? Maalala ba ninyo yan?
May issue dito, no? Go ahead, yes. Kapatid ko.
Yes. Oh. Sige po. Ano sabihin mo?
Dugtong ko lang sa part na sinabi mo. Sinasabi kasi nila na ang measurement doon ng poverty is ang mababang pagtaas ng ekonomiya at ang mabilis, ang mabagal na pagtaas ng mga income natin, ekonomiya, and ang mataas at mabilis na pagtaas ng presyo. Diba? Yun ang sinasabi natin definition of poverty. Well, ang tanong ko, kasi nasasaktan ako dito sa part na to para sa point ko, no? Alalahanin natin na ang mga Hapon ay ginera tayo hanggang 1945. 45 years after that, 1960, nagre-recover pa ang Pilipinas from that war. Mas naigi na etong mga presidenteng umupo after the Japanese occupation, nasa proseso pa sila ng recovery part. And on 1960s, pag upo ni Marcos, sa totoo lang, kung pag-aaralan yung maigi, no? Pag-aaralan yung maigi, magmula sa gera, ilang years lang. I-count mo, 1945, 15 years sa pag-upo ni Marcos. Di ba? Dapat sa ibang bansa yan, hindi pa yan recover kasi from the war, 15 years hindi ka pa makaka-recover niyan. But tignan mo, magmula 60s hanggang pag ano ni Marcos, everything is okay. Na-develop niya, marami na siyang nagawa, marami na siyang na-develop, marami siyang tinulungan. So, kumpirahin natin itong example na sinabi ko sa inyo, mga kakampi. Yun lang ang gusto kong i-add, mahal kong kapatid.
Yes, tama po kayo. Tama po yun na nung mga times na yun na hindi pa presidente si Marcos, ay ginera na tayo ng mga colonizers. No? Diba? Ngayon, nung panahon ni Marcos, ano ang binigyan niya ng pansin? Yung food security natin sa pamagitan ng Green Revolution, na kung saan tayo po yung nag-tap ng pag-produce ng mga rice at nag-import siya ng mga iba't ibang klase ng mga rice. Pero tayo yung pinakatap at naging number 2 pa po tayo sa whole world. We are... Totoo po yan, totoo yan. Kahit i-research po ninyo mga kabangsa Melayu, mga kabagang, mga kapamilya, kakampi at mga kabangsa Melayu.
Kasangga.
I-research po ninyo, kasangga. I-research po ninyo, totoo po ito. Nung time ni Marcos, naging number 2 po tayo. No? Naging number 2 po tayo sa Pilipinas. Sikan tayo sa Japan na pagdating sa ekonomiya. Tingnan ninyo yan. Aside pa dyan po, mga kabagang, aside pa dyan sa Green Revolution na yan, mayroon pa rin siyang binuo na programa na yung sinasabing, anong tawag nito, sinasabing Blue Revolution na kung saan biyayang dagat, na kung saan binigyan niya ito ng kapital yung mga fishermen para ito ay pangisda sila ng maayos at yun ang magdadala sa kanila ng magandang buhay. Maipaaral nila yung mga anak nila. At sa time pa ni Marcos, mayroon tayong sinasabing study now and pay later. Nasaan ngayon yan? Wala.
Yes. Tama yun. Exactly.
Alam niyo kung bakit ito nabanggit, kapatid? Because I was one of the scholar in Emisyo Iligan na kung saan ang Emisyo Iligan is part of the university na project po ni Marcos. At sa next episode po natin, ipapakita natin sa inyo kung ano-ano yung mga achievements po nung time ni Marcos. Nang sa ganun po ay kahit papaano, makita natin na meron palang nagawa ang mga Marcoses. At gusto kong magkomento doon sa mga damit, mga shoes, mga bags na karami-rami na kumbaga pa extravagant na masyado si Imelda Marcos. Ang tanong ko po, sila mag-asawa ay isang modelo, isang representative ng ating country. Kumbaga pa, kung ano yung imahe na pinapakita nila, ay yun din ang imahe ng mga tao ng Pilipinas. Hindi ba tama?
Yes.
Bakit naging known ang mga Filipino at nakagain ng respect sa iba't ibang bansa ng buong mundo? It's because sa kanilang imahe na they represented themselves in a way na hindi mapapahiya yung kanilang mga kapwa Pilipino. Diba? Kagaya ng kwento.
Nilay, may gusto pa rin akong idugtong dyan sa'yo, mahal kong kapatid. No? Kasi gusto ko malaman ninyo na ang aking ama ay may kamag-anak na gumagawa ng mga shoe factory. Okay? Dito sa Pilipinas, and that is for import and export quality. No? But of course, number 1 priority ng First Lady kung bakit napakarami niyang sapatos. Hindi lahat yun binili niya. Mas marami siguro doon ang ipinamigay sa kanya bilang regalo. Di ba? Bilang regalo. Kaya, wag nating husgahan. Wag po tayong humusga. Kasi, masama po yun. Nakita nyo na napakarami nung ibig sabihin binili pala niya lahat. First lady siya. Kahit naman ako Halimbawa ako Nandito lang ako, marami akong kaibigan niya na nagdo-donate sa akin. At tapos makikita mo yung wardrobe ko. Mahirap lang ako, tapos ang wardrobe ko, ganun kalapad na mga magaganda, na mga Louis Vuitton pa, pati mga sapatos ko dyan, puro mga branded. Ibig sabihin pala, kurakot na ako. Ibig sabihin, nanghusga na kayo di ba? Paano ko ipinamigay pala sa akin lahat ng mga naaawa sa akin, pinamigay sa akin, di nyo alam kung second hand ba yun o ano.
Tama po.
Hindi, yun ang point ko lang doon, di ba kapatid?
Yes, tama yun. At saka yung programa ni Marcos noon na KKK, di ba? Ang laking-laki ng tulong ng ating President Marcos nung time ng kanyang gobyerno. At sana naman huwag tayong humusga kagad. Kagaya ng sinabi ni kapatid na Derek Irwina, pagdating ho doon sa image na kinikerry po ng First Lady, kagaya po ako, hindi kami mayaman. Wala kaming masasabing talagang as in na mga business na malalaki. Wala kaming malawak na hacienda or whatever na yaman, wala po. But it's because na meron kaming titulo, meron kaming status na inaalagaan na kailangan namin i-maintain yon. Diba? Kailangan i-maintain yon dahil tayo po ay humaharap sa tao at meron tayong estado na dapat natin i-maintain. As long as hindi mo ito hinihingi or pinangungutang, kung ito naman ay binibigay sa'yo, ini-sponsor sa'yo, pasalamat tayo doon, di ba? Kaya bawal po ang manghusga. Ayan. So bago tayo, kasi we have only 5 minutes more to go. Ayan, we have only 5 minutes more to go, mga kabangsa at mga kabagang. Gusto ko lang po i-shout out ang iba dito na nagbigay po ng komento. Sabi ni Maria Luisa Lee, watching from the city of gentle people of Dumaguete City. Dumaguete.
Yes.
Hi mga taga Dumaguete. Hello po. Magandang gabi po dyan sa inyo. Si Teresa Manalo, sabi niya, hi Ninang, miss you. Hello po, Tuanku Maharanee. And then Philip Villamel, sabi niya, kasi noon, sa panahon ni Marcos, nauna muna sambayanan bago ang bulsa. Correct. Tama po kayo.
Yes.
At hindi naiintindihan po ng ating mga millennial ngayon na yung tinatamasa po ninyo na mga schools, na mga government schools, mga university, mga state colleges, yan po lahat ay programa po ni Marcos. By next episode, ipapakita ho natin para maalala ninyo na ito palang ipinagyayabang ng iba't ibang mga presidente na nagpapalit-palit ay gawa pala ni President Marcos.
Yes.
Kaya dapat magpasalamat din tayo. Matuto tayong magpasalamat. Sabi ni Maria Luisa Lee, ganun talaga ang buhay ng mga tao. Mas tinitingnan nila ang mali mo kaysa mga nagagawa mong magaganda at tama. Correct. Tama po. Ang hirap po talaga mag-please ng tao, kagaya ng sinabi ni Ma'am She Divine. At sabi ulit ni Maria Luisa, Derek Irwina, tanong ko lang, ano po ba sa English ang pang-ilan si President Marcos sa Pilipinas? Pang-10 po. Pang-10 po si... Ayan. And then si Philip Villamel, sabi niya, masagana 99. Isa yan sa mga programa noon ni Marcos. Tama po kayo. And then Philip Villamel. Ayan, KKK, sabi niya, programa rin yan ni Marcos. At saka, ang dami pa po. Naku, nawala ako. Sorry po, sorry. Marcos was our 10th president. Alam po ba ninyo kung paano mapagmahal si Marcos at marunong magpahalaga sa kanino man? Itinakda ito ay ginawa niya para sa mga mag-aaral at sa bayan. And study now, pay later ay panukala ni Ninoy Aquino. Ito ay buong puso pong, ano to? inimplinta ni Marcos para sa bayan. Yes. So talagang ang nag-umpisa nito ay si Marcos. Siya talaga yon. Rizalyn Mostrado, sabi niya, Dan, share almost 90 FB pages. Thank you po, Riza. Thank you sa patuloy. And we will give you a recognition certificate, Riza, for always sharing our video. Sa lahat ho na mag-share po sa ating video, we will give you a recognition certificate po from the Heritage. Ayan. So wala na ho kaming oras. Next episode po, wag po kayong mawawala dahil more interesting topic po. So paalam muna tayo. Mauna ka na, Mami Divine.
Pansamantala muna po kami magpapaalam at babalik po kami sa darating na Friday, same time dito po sa Heritage. Maraming salamat po, Direk Arwina Arguelles, Miss Mary Diggs, and kay Madam Princess Maharanee. Maraming salamat po. At ganun din po sa mga umaantabay po at patuloy na umaantabay po sa atin, lalong-lalo na po sa ating mga inbox dito, mga messages at comments dito po sa atin sa Heritage. And yan lang po, and good evening po sa inyong lahat.
Ayan. Next, Sister Marie, we need to say goodbye.
Okay, maraming salamat sa pagpanood ng gabi, sa pag-stay hanggang matapos kami. Sa Friday, magkita-kita ulit tayo. At huwag niyong kalimutan i-share at saka i-like, mag-comment pag kayo nanonood. At saka kung mayroon kayo itatanong, feel free to ask. Maraming salamat sa lahat kong pamilya, kaibigan. Sa mga bata, employ, lahat, alam ko tulog na kayo. Sweet dreams sa lahat. Good night, Direk Arwina. Good night, Mami Divine. Tuanku Maharanee, good night. And I talk to you later. Thank you, Josh. Maraming salamat sa tulong mo ngayon. At saka si Babes, thank you rin ha. Kasi si Jang, kasi nagpatulong rin ako sa kanya. At I see you guys Friday. And I'm gonna make sure that I will see you too. Good night, everybody, and have a nice evening.
Yes.
Your turn. Kapatid na din.
Yes. Eto masasabi ko sa inyo, no, mga kakampi, I have words for you. Kasi malapit ng election, no? Sabi ni Winston Churchill, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all others that had been tried. Ayan, tandaan niyo po yan, ha? And ito, ha, meron daw 10 defects of election. 1, deception. Ba? 2, money. 3, influence. 4, way of life. 5, cheating. 6, disputes and conflicts. 7, limitations and restrictions. And 8, deficit and inflations, and 8 values of formation, and 10 perpetuation. So ayan lang ang word for my day. And of course, i-share ko sa inyo. And then darating ang araw, of course, I will talk about it and pag-usapan din namin ng aking mahal na kapatid. Okay? So magandang gabi po sa inyo lahat. Maraming salamat at sa susunod na episode. Bye!
Yan. Thank you po. Thank you sa inyong magandang pagpapaalam. At doon sa ating mga subscribers po, please paki-subscribe po yung aking YouTube channel. Sana po ay bisitahin nyo po yung aking YouTube channel din at saka yung aking TikTok para po kayo ay ma-enjoy, no? Ayan, so thank you kay Josh sa technical side. Thank you po kay Kuya Jesus na madalas nagko-comment. Kay Rizalyn, thank you po. Sa lahat po ng nagsishare po ng ating video, please paki-share pa rin po ninyo yan. At thank you sa mga RG team, sa Radya Sirungan, of Kidatuan, Buayan. Maraming salamat po sa lahat po ng mga taga Cotabato, Paglat, Maguindanao, Maguindanao, General Santos, Kabakan, North Cotabato, at sa lahat-lahat ng sumama po sa amin at nakikinig. Maraming salamat po sa aking mga anak na hindi ako inihiwalayan. Thank you so much. At this time po, magpaalam muna kami pansamantala. See you on Friday. Huwag po kayong mawawala. And thank you so much. Good night, everyone. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Love you guys.
Good night. See you Friday. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is ATC International. Welcome to Asian Television Content. Channel 31 Online TV.
Working 8 hours a day, you're tired every week, getting paid and still can't save money? You're probably thinking for possible income or business that you can do while working. Then join Easy Wealth today, a company that creates an opportunity for all, where they can reach their goals of having a better lifestyle. By having a comprehensive marketing plans, and providing good quality products, we envision financial freedom for everyone and prioritize health and wealth. The Easy Wealth products, Easy Wealth Juice Drink. Each sachet contains 9 ingredients: mangosteen, acai berry, guyabano, wheatgrass, moringa, vitamin C, stevia, turmeric and barley. EZ White Glutathione, a powerful antioxidant that's made in the body's cells. Its levels decrease as a result of aging, stress and toxin exposure. Love and Glow Kojic Soap exfoliates and penetrates deep into your skin, removes the dark spots, the discoloration from sunbathing and other skin imperfections, leaves your skin smooth and soft. Love and Bright Gluta Soap has the benefit of making skin brighter and provides a fairer, glowing, healthy and younger skin.
Join now and be an Easy Wealth member. Thank you.